Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for attending this iteration of the HDIAC webinar. This month's webinar will focus on the Destruction of Syrian Chemicals Weapons Program. Please feel free to submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by clicking on the question and answer hot button at the top right of your screen. You can then hit the drop-down menu and select all panelists, and then you should submit your questions, and we'll make sure that the appropriate subject matter expert responds to each and every question. And without further ado, turn it over to this week's presenter, Mr. Dennis Metz.
Thank you, Stuart. As Stuart mentioned, my name is Dennis Metz, and I am an HDIAC WMD subject matter expert, referred to as a SME, and I am from SciTech Services Incorporated. Let me welcome all of you to the HDIAC Weapons of Mass Destruction webinar. As you can see on this first slide, today's webinar briefing will be on the Syrian Chemical Weapons Destruction Program. Before I get started on the webinar, I want to give a special thank you to Mr. Tim Blades from the U.S. Army Edgewood Chemical Biological Center, ECBC, at Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, for his review and input to the briefing slides. His participation is greatly appreciated. Mr. Blades is the Director of Operations of the Chemical Biological Application and Risk Reduction, known as CBAR, at ECBC. Most recently, Tim was the ECBC Mission Commander of the Syrian Chemical Weapons Destruction Operation performed on board the MV Cape Ray using the Field Deployable Hydrolysis System, known as FDHS. I would like to make a couple of introductory remarks before diving into the presentation. I think it is quite evident from the events which led up to the destruction of Syria's chemical weapons that even still today, a number of state and non-state actors continue to pursue WMD, which possess a persistent threat to the security of the United States as well as to our allies and partners. Dealing with Syria's chemical weapons program was no doubt an extraordinary accomplishment in the face of significant Syrian challenges such as instability, civil war, humanitarian disaster, and an influx of terrorist elements. The unprecedented effort to destroy the chemical weapons truly demonstrated the ability of the Department of Defense, other U.S. departments and agencies, and numerous international partners to provide a creative, collaborative approach to develop innovative solutions to complex problems. When one talks about the destruction of Syria's chemical weapons program, one of the first points of discussion that usually arises is the U.S.'s role in the destruction effort, and in particular the U.S. ship Cape Ray and the Field Deployable Hydrolysis Systems, FDHS, which were kitted on board the ship and used to neutralize the agents. While the Cape Ray and the Field Deployable Hydrolysis Systems was the centerpiece of the U.S. contribution, it represents just one of many critical and important pieces to the Syrian chemical weapons destruction puzzle. Therefore, the objective of this webinar is twofold, as shown on slide 2. First, to provide information on the complete Syrian chemical weapons destruction effort with regard to the direct involvement by other countries, and second, to present some details, albeit at a top-level perspective, on the U.S. involvement in the destruction of the Syrian chemical weapons. With regard to the background shown on this slide, slide 3, what became an eye-opener for me as I was doing my research for the webinar topic was not only the magnitude, but also the multitude of events which led up to the actual on-the-ground efforts to destroy the chemical weapons. The next 3 slides, slides 4, 5, and 6, will highlight the significant events and their associated dates which occurred in 2012 and 2013, which culminated in the actual chemical weapons destruction being conducted. July 23, 2012, Syrian Foreign Ministry spokesman Jihad Maqdisi during a news conference broadcast, confirmed for the first time that Syria had chemical weapons, in which he stated, "Any stocks of WMD or any unconventional weapon that the Syrian Arab Republic possess would never be used against civilian or against the Syrian people during this crisis at any circumstances, no matter how the crisis would evolve." August 20th, 2012. President Barack Obama articulated his red line regarding the use of chemical weapons in Syria. Obama said his calculations on a military response would change significantly if the United States sees a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized. December 23rd, 2012. The first allegation of chemical weapons use was reported. 7 people were allegedly killed in Homs, Syria by a poisonous gas used by the Assad regime. The coverage included the report of side effects such as nausea, relaxed muscles, blurred vision, and breathing difficulties. March 20th, 2013. Bashar Jafari, permanent representative of the Syrian Arab Republic to the UN, announced to journalists that his government had requested the UN Secretary General to establish an impartial technical mission to investigate the allegation of the use of chemical weapons on March 19th in northern Syria. March 21st, 2013, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon announced the United Nations will conduct an investigation on the possible use of chemical weapons in Syria, in conjunction with the World Health Organization, WHO, and the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW. Prior to the announcement, France and the United Kingdom sent letters to the Secretary General calling for investigations into 3 alleged incidents of the use of chemical weapons in Syria. August 26th, 2013. The U.S. Secretary of State, John Kerry, said in his press briefing that all information the U.S. has, including reports of the number of victims, their symptoms, and the first-hand accounts from humanitarian organizations, strongly indicate that chemical weapons were used in Syria. He also said that Syria attempted to cover up the incident in the days following the attack. August 30th, 2013. Secretary Kerry, in an address, stated that we know that the Assad regime has used chemical weapons multiple times this year and has used them on a smaller scale, but still it has used them against its own people. He also said that our intelligence community has concluded that the Syrian government used chemical weapons against the opposition elements in Damascus on the early morning of August 21st. Secretary Kerry also made clear that the U.S. was preparing for strikes on Assad's government. September 26th, 2013. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon delivered a report on the U.S. investigation into the use of chemical weapons in Syria. The report concluded that chemical weapons were used on August 21st on a relatively large scale and that the victims included civilians. The report cited evidence of the nerve agent sarin both in the environment and present in victims of the attack. It was outside of the report's mandate to assign blame for who used the chemical weapons. September 27, 2013. The Executive Council of the OPCW adopted a timeline for destroying Syria's chemical weapons. Hours later, the United Nations Security Council unanimously voted to adopt the resolution that endorses the OPCW timeline for destroying Syria's chemical weapons arsenal. The Security Council resolution says that the body will impose measures under Chapter 7 of its charter if Syria does not comply with the resolution or uses or authorizes the transfer of any chemical agents. October 1st, 2013, a joint team of OPCW and UN officials arrived in Damascus, Syria to begin initial planning phase of helping the country destroy its chemical weapons production facilities. October 31st, 2013, the OPCW confirmed that Syria destroyed or rendered inoperable all of its declared facilities for mixing and producing chemical weapons. The OPCW was able to inspect 21 of the 23 sites where these facilities were housed. The remaining 2 sites could not be visited due to security concerns, but inspectors said that the equipment was moved out of these sites and destroyed. November 15, 2013, the OPCW Executive Council approved a plan for the elimination of Syria's stockpile of chemical weapons. The plan called for transporting the weapons outside of Syria and destruction of the chemical agents in a country that has yet to be identified. The most critical chemicals are to be transported out of Syria by December 31st, 2013, and the remainder by February 5th, 2014. The plan calls for the destruction no later than June 30th, 2014, and the destruction of certain priority chemicals by March 15th, 2014. December 5th, 2013, the Defense Department offered the OPCW a technical solution for removing the worst chemical weapons from war-torn Syria by December 31st and was readying the capability for early January if the OPCW accepts. December 12, 2013, the UN team investigating incidents of chemical weapons use in Syria issued its final report to UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. The report found that chemical weapons were likely used in 5 of the 7 attacks investigated. The nerve agent sarin was likely used in 4 of the attacks, one of which was the large-scale attack on a Damascus suburb in August. This slide presents the key countries and organizations involved in the chemical weapons destruction effort. Warships from Denmark, Norway, and the United Kingdom provided continuous security to the cargo ships until the chemicals were offloaded. Naval vessels from the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation provided security to the cargo ships while in Syrian territorial waters. The Danish freighter Ark Futura carried Syrian chemical weapons materials from Latakia, Syria, to Gioia Tauro, Italy, to offload chemicals to the Cape May, and then continued to the UK to offload chemical weapons material. The Norwegian freighter, the Tycho, transported chemical weapons material from Latakia to Finland, and after offloading chemical weapons material there, continued to Texas, where it offloaded chemicals for incineration. The OPCW assisted the UN in the conduct of a UN investigation on the possible use of chemical weapons in Syria. In addition, the OPCW was part of a UN OPCW team responsible for overseeing the destruction of Syria's chemical weapons program. Syria was involved in all aspects of its chemical weapons destruction process. As an example, Syrian personnel, under the supervision of experts from the OPCW, supported by the UN, used cutting torches and angle grinders to destroy or disable a range of items which included missile warheads, aerial bombs, and mixing and filling equipment. The United States provided the MV Cape Ray, kitted with the FDHS, that was used to neutralize the Priority 1 chemicals in the Syrian CW stockpile. This slide presents information regarding the movement of Syria's chemical weapons stockpile. The chemical weapons stockpile was located at 21 chemical weapons-related sites. Syria had 2 additional sites which were declared as abandoned, and the chemical weapons program items they contained were moved to other declared sites, which had been inspected by the joint OPCW UN mission team. All of the chemicals associated with the chemical weapons stockpile were transported to the port of Latakia in northwestern Syria. The first load arrived at Latakia on January 7th, and the final load arrived at the port city on June 23rd. A total of 1,308 metric tons of chemicals was declared by the Syrian Arab Republic. It consisted of 1,047 metric tons of priority 1 chemicals, which included 133 metric tons of isopropanol that had been destroyed on site in Syria, and 260 metric tons of priority 2 chemicals. The priority 1 chemicals were methylphosphonic difluoride, or DF, sulfur mustard, and isopropanol. The priority 2 chemicals were less dangerous precursor chemicals. On this slide, the priority 1 and 2 chemicals were transloaded onto 2 freighters at Latakia, the Ark Futura from Denmark and the Tycho from Norway. At the Italian port city Gioia Tauro, the entire consignment of 600 metric tons of priority 1 chemicals excuse me, from the Syrian arsenal was transloaded on July 2nd from the Ark Futura onto the U.S. maritime vessel Cape Ray. The transloading took place with the presence of OPCW inspectors who continuously monitored the process. The Cape Ray then sailed into international waters in the Mediterranean Sea and conducted the neutralization process at sea with 2 field deployable hydrolysis systems. A team of OPCW inspectors remained aboard the Cape Ray throughout the neutralization operations to verify that the chemicals were destroyed in accordance with the stringent provisions of the Chemical Weapons Convention, including for safety and security as stipulated in Article 4, Paragraph 10 of the Convention. The Ark Futura continued on to the United Kingdom, where it offloaded the rest of Syria's priority 1 chemicals for destruction in a commercial facility at Ellesmere Port. It then headed to Finland with some priority 2 chemicals to be destroyed at a commercial facility at Riihimäki. The second cargo ship, the Norwegian vessel Tycho, delivered a consignment of priority 2 chemicals to Finland for destruction at the Riihimäki facility. The ship then headed to Port Arthur, Texas, where the rest of the priority 2 chemicals would be destroyed at a commercial facility. A multinational maritime task force comprised of forces from Denmark, Norway, Russia, China, UK, and Finland were positioned in the eastern Mediterranean Sea to provide secure transportation of chemicals to their ultimate destruction location. This slide, slide 10, provides photos of the 2 critical components provided by the U.S. They were the Field Deployable Hydrolysis System, FDHS, and the Cape Ray, a U.S. maritime vessel. I will discuss more details later on the FDHS. The MV Cape Ray is a National Defense Reserve Fleet vessel owned by the Department of Transportation's Maritime Administration and was specifically outfitted as a UN-approved chemical weapons destruction facility. The MV Cape Ray is a roll-on, roll-off, and container ship and was built in 1977. This slide, slide 11, provides some notable facts about the Field Deployable Hydrolysis System. In December 2012, the Department of Defense had identified a capability gap in chemical agent disposal operations with respect to the Syrian chemical weapons stockpile destruction and sought a solution that would meet the critical mission need by the summer of 2013. The chemicals which DoD would help to destroy were mustard gas and components of the nerve agent sarin and VX, and the stockpile was mostly in bulk liquid storage, not in filled artillery shells or munitions. Based on that understanding, the DoD analyzed various technologies, including incineration, and decided to use a proven technology that DoD had a lot of experience with in the U.S. dealing with bulk liquid chemicals. Consequently, the proven technology selected was a hydrolysis system or neutralization technology, which essentially mixes the chemicals with water and sodium hypochlorite bleach and produces a very low-level waste or effluent. This process has been used to neutralize mustard gas at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland and was also used to neutralize DF at Pine Bluff Arsenal in Arkansas. The proven technology had to be designed in a way that it would be transportable. In February 2013, the FDHS Fast Track Acquisition Project was initiated. The first FDHS unit was delivered on July 1st, 2013. The FDHS effort went through full life cycle development from design and fabrication to engineering, test and evaluation of the system over a 5-month period. The FDHS project team was comprised of the U.S. Army Edgewood Chemical Biological Center, ECBC, the Joint Project Manager for Elimination, JPME, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, DTRA, the Joint Program Executive Office for Chemical and Biological Defense, JPEO-CBD, U.S. Army Chemical Materials Activity, CMA, and the U.S. Army Contracting Command, ACC. The FDHS is a transportable, high-throughput modular demilitarization system. The system uses neutralization technology to destroy bulk chemical warfare agents and their precursors by heating and mixing with reagents. The neutralization process generates hazardous waste in volumes of 5 to 14 times the volume of chemical warfare material that is treated. This hazardous waste can be commercially disposed of in accordance with host nation environmental laws. The next slide, slide 12, shows a photo of the full-scale FDHS. The FDHS operates as an interchangeable demilitarization component of a larger modular destruction system. The modular system with the FDHS is designed to deploy worldwide and is configured for shipment in approximately 35 20-foot shipping containers. The FDHS is designed for 24/7 operations with a crew of 15 personnel needed for each shift. Throughput varies depending on the material being treated, with rates from 5 to 25 metric tons per day. Multiple units can be co-located to further increase throughput rates while sharing security and other assets. This slide, slide 13, discusses some details regarding the MV Cape Ray freighter. The MV Cape Ray had been chosen in November 2013 as a suitable platform for utilizing the FDHS. Fitting of the 2 FDHS units aboard the MV Cape Ray began in Portsmouth, Virginia on December 2nd, 2013, and was completed 6 weeks later. Sea trials to test the units began on January 10th, 2014, and finished on January 14th. During the sea trials, the crew and the FDHS operators evaluated the ship and the FDHS at various sea states. The crew conducted several training drills and assessed all systems aboard. The MV Cape Ray departed Portsmouth on January 27, 2014, en route to Rota, Spain. As a point of information, a 3rd FDH unit was included on the freighter as a spare. This slide, slide 14, depicts the MV Cape Ray FDHS operations. The ultimate goal was to build a fully self-contained neutralization system on the ship. This system would be comprised of the following components: storage of the reactants, storage of the Syrian chemical agents, and storage of the effluents resulting from the neutralization process, as well as the FDHS. When fully reconfigured, the MV Cape Ray featured 4 decks and a lower storage area. The spar deck held 30 reagent containers and had a helicopter pad. The upper deck held 180 reagent containers for the neutralization of the mustard and the DF. When empty, the containers were repurposed to receive effluents. The main trailer deck housed 2 FDHS units set up side by side and offered storage space for the 127 containers with the mustard agent and nerve agent precursors. The lower trailer deck held 68 containers of 6,600 gallons each for storage of effluents. The tank top held another 15 containers of 6,600 gallons each for storage of effluents. The main area of operations was the trailer deck. It was configured in such a way that no agent or effluent, whether gaseous or liquid, could escape the ship and contaminate the air or sea. This environmental enclosure enabled the isolation of the deck from the rest of the vessel. Effluents were stored under controlled conditions until transferred on land. In particular, the pH levels were adjusted so that they could be held in the tanks for months or even years, as experience at the Newport, Indiana Chemical Weapons Destruction Facility had demonstrated. The effluents, which were essentially low hazardous waste, could be incinerated at any commercial facility in Europe or the United States without the need for special permits or reconfiguration of installations. In simplistic terms, the neutralization operation followed these 5 basic steps in sequence. Step 1, the system processes the caustic reagent and water. Step 2, the system processes the chemical agent. Step 3, the system produces a chemical reaction and neutralizes the chemical agent. Step 4, operators transfer effluent to an interim holding tank for a pH adjustment. Step 5, operators transfer effluent from the interim holding tank to isotainers for storage until treatment. However, the mustard and DF were neutralized slightly differently. Mustard was hydrolyzed using a batch process at a ratio of about 13.5 parts water at 95 degrees centigrade to 1 part ambient mustard. The mustard breaks down in hot water to hypochlorite acid and thiiodiglycol. The effluent's pH is adjusted to neutral using sodium hydroxide. DF is hydrolyzed as a continuous feed process using a ratio of 5 parts water at ambient temperature to 1 part DF at ambient temperature. DF breaks down to methylphosphonic acid and hydrogen fluoride. A batch process using sodium hydroxide is used to adjust the pH of the effluent. This slide, slide 15, provides some details regarding the neutralization operations conducted on board the MV Cape Ray. Aboard the freighter were 34 mariners, 64 chemical specialists from ECBC, a security team, and a contingent from U.S. European Command. The neutralization of 581 metric tons of DF began on July 7, 2014, and was completed on August 13, 2014. The DF operation generated 6,000 metric tons of effluent. The neutralization of 19.8 metric tons of mustard began on August 13, 2014, and was completed on August 17, 2014. The mustard operation generated 350 to 400 metric tons of effluent. This slide, slide 16, provides some details on the MV Cape Ray's itinerary following the neutralization operations of DF and mustard. The MV Cape Ray traveled to Bremer, Germany to deliver the effluent from a mustard neutralization operation for incineration at a land-based facility in Munster. The MV Cape Ray then continued on to Hamina, Finland, to deliver the effluent from the DF neutralization operation for incineration at a land-based facility in Riomaki. The MV Cape Ray arrived back in Portsmouth, Virginia on September 17, 2014. ECBC operators remained on board until month's end, in which they demobilized and recovered the equipment from the ship. They also decontaminated parts of the FDHS that had been exposed to chemical agents, so the ship could be returned to the U.S. Maritime Administration. This slide, slide 17, offers some points of interest regarding the MV Cape Ray FDHS operations. The original schedule projection for operation was 60 to 90 days. It was assumed that the FDHS units would be down 20% of the time due to high seas and bad weather. Average throughput rate was projected to be 11 to 17 metric tons per day. However, good weather and low seas occurred. Actual average throughput was 14 metric tons per day. Operation was completed in 42 days with no unplanned operating downtime. And finally, no major incidents occurred during the operation. This slide, slide 18, provides the contact information for the appropriate contractor individuals at HDIAC. Stephen Malone, the HDIAC Director, Stuart Stahl, the HDIAC Deputy Director, and myself, Dennis Metz, the HDIAC WMD Subject Matter Expert. This concludes the webinar presentation.
This is Stuart Stahl again. We want to thank everyone for attending this webinar and thank Dennis for his expertise as it relates to this specific topic. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us again. Thank you very much. Have a great day.